Do you feel like your inner light faded and you can't even remember the last time you had real peace behind that forced smile? You aren't listening to this by accident. God knew the exact moment your weary soul would need to hear this. Right now, when you are pushing forward out of sheer obligation, keeping a strong face while just going through the motions, carrying an invisible exhaustion that no one else sees. The Lord wants to meet you today with a simple, powerful truth. Your joy is coming back. It was not lost forever, nor did it die under the weight of pretending. It is not buried. God is bringing it back. This emptiness does not happen overnight. It creeps in slowly, starting with a constant, quiet worry. Then comes disappointment, then deep fatigue, until suddenly, you realize you are just faking excitement for things you used to love. Your phone keeps buzzing with emails and notifications. You reply, you tick off tasks. The busy day rolls on, but inside you are running on empty. You perform, you smile, you deliver, yet you feel so disconnected. So many of us carry this silent exhaustion. There are no tears or complaints, just a heavy, tired sigh when no one is looking, a lack of hope when waking up, and a strange numbness even though nothing is visibly wrong. When you have to fake being okay for too long, a quiet doubt sets in. You wonder if you will ever feel light again, or if your soul is permanently trapped behind this happy mask. But God does not ignore your hidden pain. He sees everything you bottled up just to keep others from worrying, and the battle you fought while pretending. He heard your silent cries when the room went dark, when you finally let down your guard and stopped smiling. With the world finally quiet, you sat alone, trying to piece together a heart that felt so heavy and tired. Listen closely. God did not come to expose your exhaustion or judge your weakness. He came to lift you up. He wants you to know that this weariness is not your final chapter. There is a beautiful promise in Psalm 30, verse 5. It says, "Weeping may last for the night, but joy comes with the morning." This truth does not ignore your pain. It does not pretend your dark nights never happened. Instead, it sets a limit on them, reminding you that darkness has an expiration date. It tells your weary soul that dawn is coming, even if it feels delayed. Today, this promise is heaven's answer to you. God is preparing a new morning for your soul. Maybe you have been waiting for some massive external breakthrough, something to fix everything, so you can finally stop pretending. But here is the thing. God usually starts his work in the quiet, hidden spaces. He heals the root, calms your mind, and shifts your perspective, releasing the heavy tension you have carried, restoring strength to where you felt completely drained. Then, when you least expect it, something shifts. It is rarely a loud event. Usually, it is just a quiet sigh of relief. It feels like a new sense of peace, a gentle spark telling you it is safe to lower your guard and hope again. Never ignore that tiny internal shift. That is exactly where true, lasting healing begins. Maybe you do not feel fully restored today. The problems are still there, and the hidden wounds still sting. Even so, God is moving. The fact that you are here listening and gently opening up your guarded heart says everything. It means heaven is not done with you. Beneath all that heavy, exhausting armor, you are still alive. God is stepping into the deep places nobody else can reach. His joy is not a fake smiling mask. It is real. It runs deep, holding you up and restoring your strength. This joy can return even while you are still waiting, because it comes from God's presence, not from having perfect circumstances. So, even if your future is unclear, do not believe the lie that you are empty. Holy things are growing inside you. If this speaks to you, leave a like to tell the Lord that you are ready to let down your guard and trust Him. Write "God is bringing back my joy" in the comments. Let this be your quiet declaration of faith, and maybe a light for someone else who is also faking their strength today. Do not brush this off. Some messages just offer a quick comfort, but others mark a turning point in your life. You might not see it yet, but God has already begun healing the exhausted, hidden parts of your soul. Something is shifting. Pieces are falling into place, and the real you is slowly waking up again. Your joy will not return the same way it left, because what God is bringing back is stronger, deeper, and far more real than any happy face you have had to fake. That is the breakthrough most people miss, and it is the key to what God is doing next. Silent burdens are the heaviest. You get up, put on a presentable face, handle your responsibilities, reply to messages, and pretend everything is fine. You look perfectly strong and put together, but inside, it is a completely different story. Your mind never stops. A quiet, heavy pressure follows you everywhere. This exhaustion is not in your muscles. It is in your soul from pretending to be okay for so long. That quiet pain hurts the most because nobody sees it. It is hard to explain this exhaustion. It does not just come from one big problem. It builds slowly, like a room filling with clutter until there is no room left to breathe. One worry piles onto another. A fear stays too long. A disappointment echoes. Your mind keeps racing even when everything around you finally goes quiet. Then night falls. The house goes dark. The daytime noise fades. Yet inside you, everything is still wide awake. Maybe you know exactly how that feels. You lie down, close your eyes, and try to rest, but your mind keeps spinning. You replay conversations and wonder what you did wrong. You just want to stop that inner wheel for a few minutes, just to feel true rest. But your soul stays on high alert, waiting for something that never arrives. This constant strain is incredibly draining. Eventually, you stop just feeling tired and start feeling a strange, nameless emptiness. It is not just worry anymore. It is the feeling that something inside you has gone completely hollow, as if your strength is trapped in a season that will not end. Good things are still there, yes, but you cannot seem to let them in. Hope does not vanish entirely, but it feels so far away. And that is exactly where most people get confused. People think because you still show up, you must be fine. They assume because you have not cracked, you are just exaggerating your pain. So you convince yourself to push through. Stay silent. Delay your rest and hide the heavy burden behind a smile. But God does not judge you by your productivity, what you endure, or the perfect strong image you have had to maintain. He sees the heavy tension hidden behind your polite, quick replies. He knows the deep sigh you let out when no one was looking. He heard the silence you chose instead of explaining how much you are hurting. That is why this moment matters so much, because when heaven touches a weary soul, it does not do it to judge. It comes to bring truth. And here's the truth you need most right now. Sleep cannot fix this kind of exhaustion. Distractions will not cure your sadness. And anxiety does not just vanish when someone tells you to have faith. Some healing runs deeper. There are hidden places in your soul that God needs to visit with patience, tenderness, and time. Often the heaviest weight is not one major wound, but the quiet buildup of unsaid things, the text that never came, the closed door, the hard work no one noticed, the prayer that felt completely ignored, or the sudden news that ruined your entire week. That habit of swallowing your pain just to keep everyone else comfortable. It sits inside you, and over time it changes how you see your whole world. Your heart guards itself. Your hope whispers. Your peace feels incredibly fragile. Even quiet moments feel incomplete, as if a part of you has forgotten how to relax. This weariness does not always look like a crisis. Sometimes it just feels like distance. You sit at the dinner table, but you are not truly there. You hear someone talking to you, but your mind is trapped somewhere else entirely. You stare at your phone, hoping for a distraction, only to end up more exhausted. You try to pray, but the words falter, as if something inside you is just too tired to form the thoughts. This, too, is part of your silent battle yet. God remains close. Not because you feel Him every second, but because His presence never depends on your feelings. There are times when your soul grows so dark, you mistake His silence for distance. But not understanding what God is doing is very different from Him doing nothing. So even if you see no clear answers today, even if you cannot lift this heavy weight just yet, and even if your mood rises and falls like a restless tide, the Lord is still right beside you. Remember this before we go any further, because this endless exhaustion can easily warp the way you look at things that once brought you hope. Now you look at them with doubt. What once brought joy now brings fear. What once felt possible now seems completely out of reach. It is not that you have lost your faith. You have just been fighting too long without any emotional relief. And in the middle of it, your heart begins to ask questions you would never dare say out loud. You wonder how much longer. You wonder if you will ever feel light again. You wonder if you can dare to hope without getting hurt again. You wonder if God is actually working on the things you gave Him. Those questions do not make you weak. They make you human. There is no shame in feeling them. The real danger comes when you believe this exhaustion defines your story forever. That is when the pain tries to claim more space than it deserves. That is when your mind starts repeating a dangerous lie, whispering that you will always feel this way. But you will not always feel like this. This season has been long, and it has changed you. It has stolen your words, your energy, and your clarity, but it does not get to write the end of your story. God does not just see how tired you are. He knows the exact moment this cycle will break, this constant pressure to look perfectly fine while your soul feels suffocated. Often before a visible breakthrough appears, He allows what is actually happening inside to come to light. Because there is a hidden root beneath this heavy weariness, a root that is rarely recognized in time, which is usually behind this exhausting act you have been maintaining without fully realizing it. Not everything that steals your peace looks like an obvious disaster. Most of the time, the things that quietly erode your faith slip in unnoticed. It takes root in your thoughts, warping how you see yourself, how you interpret life, and what you expect next. When you're busy pretending you're fine, you don't even notice it. You mistake it for caution or simple exhaustion. It even disguises itself as logic to help you stay strong, but secretly, it is breaking you inside. That's where your quiet battle begins. Fear doesn't always scream at you while you're trying to smile. Some days it just whispers. It follows you to work, sits with you when the acting stops, and turns even the simplest choices into terrifying threats while you try to hold it all together. It doesn't have to scream to break you. It just plants a single, toxic thought. Don't hope for too much so you won't get hurt again. Once you believe that, your heart starts to shrink behind your smile. And then comes the guilt. I'm not talking about guilt from actual mistakes. I mean that heavy, confusing emotional burden you hide so well. The kind that's almost impossible to spot. The guilt of still being broken, of feeling utterly exhausted, while pretending to be everyone's pillar of strength. Guilt for not being able to explain your pain, or for pouring yourself out for people who took your smile and broke your heart. It all leaves deep scars. Slowly, your soul gets used to wearing this heavy mask, as if it's who you are. Then there's comparison, quietly draining you behind closed doors. Scroll through your phone for a minute. You see everyone else's wins, their easy smiles, their answered prayers. Doors fly open for them. While you try to smile and be happy for them, you secretly ask yourself, why is my life so stuck? You don't have to be jealous for that to hurt. It hurts because you are so tired of pretending. You've been waiting, praying, endlessly, for breakthrough in areas that are still completely dark. So your exhausted mind starts doing unfair math, as if someone else's highlight reel somehow erases the silent process God is walking you through. That constant acting drains you. It ruins your mood, poisons your hope, and makes you look inward with dread. Things you once celebrated, you now approach with caution. The dreams that used to excite you now feel distant. It's not because you've lost your faith entirely, but because you spent too long fighting silent battles while acting okay. And then a new enemy appears, misunderstanding God's silence. When God doesn't move on your timeline, your exhausted, mask-wearing mind begins filling the quiet space with painful assumptions. Maybe he stopped listening. Maybe I'm stuck like this. These thoughts don't hit you all at once. They drip slowly into your mind while you're busy working. They start as doubts, grow into quiet suspicions, and eventually look like absolute truth behind your forced smiles. That's why this moment is critical. Not all of this hidden pain came from your actual circumstances. These heavy thoughts have been battering your soul for far too long. Some were born from deep hurt, others from disappointment, growing in seasons where you had to pretend to be strong without a break. They started small, but they slowly took over your mind. You can absolutely love God and still feel completely eroded inside. You can pray faithfully while hiding dark, terrifying thoughts about your own future. You can look perfectly stable to everyone else while battling intense insecurity and fear within. You carry emotional exhaustion, terrified of getting hurt again. That doesn't make you a hypocrite. It just means you are fighting a silent war under that calm exterior. See, your biggest enemy isn't what happened to you on the outside, but what started growing inside while you smiled through the pain. That's where exhausting thoughts take root. I can't take another hit. Don't get your hopes up. Nothing good ever lasts. It'll just end in heartbreak again. When you repeat these things, you stop truly living. You just switch to survival mode behind your mask. You build walls, lower your expectations, and guard your heart. Your fake smiles become exhausting. You trust less. You feel less not because you don't want to be happy, but because you're terrified of shattering. That's why encouraging words bounce right off you. God's promises feel incredibly distant, not because they aren't true, but because you are constantly on guard. The trauma left deep scars. Your mind replays the hurt, and your body carries the weight of pretending. With all that inner noise, finding genuine hope again is incredibly hard. But please listen closely to what I'm about to say. God doesn't just see your struggle. He sees the exhaustion you hide. He knows the root of your fear before you can even explain it. He knows when the guilt crushed you. He knows exactly when comparing yourself stole your inner peace. He hears that negative voice draining you, even though you've gotten used to pretending everything is fine. His healing won't just be surface level. He didn't come to just give you a temporary boost or make you feel better for a few hours. The Lord wants to heal the exact place where pretending started changing who you are. He wants to tear down those logical-sounding lies. He wants to bring truth to your confusion. He wants to show your weary soul that this hard season doesn't define who you are. Your struggle isn't just simple tiredness, and it doesn't just come from past pain or a difficult season. You've been battling heavy thoughts that, if you keep hiding them inside, will eventually steal your strength, clarity, and hope. But God is already stepping in to rescue you. Even if you still feel heavy and some questions remain unanswered, don't lose heart. Something is already shifting beneath the surface. Because when the Lord decides to restore you, He doesn't stay on the surface. He goes to the source, touching the root, revealing what is hidden, and illuminating the confusion in your heart. And right there at the root, that has been draining you more than you realized behind that smile, is where God is starting to work in a way you will soon recognize. That hidden root of exhaustion doesn't just wear down your thoughts. It alters how you show up before God when you are tired of acting fine. Your heart still believes yes, but it is exhausted. You still pray, even if the words come out broken. Your faith hasn't disappeared, but it is deeply bruised, no longer shining. Right there in that quiet exhaustion, Scripture stops feeling distant and starts to become incredibly intimate, because it doesn't just show easy victories. It reveals weary souls who kept seeking the Lord, while carrying a pain they had to hide from everyone else. One of the most human stories in Scripture is Hannah's in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 1. Her pain wasn't new. It had been going on for a long time. She wasn't facing a temporary setback or a brief sadness. Like you, she faced a long, draining weight that had seeped into her very identity, affecting her self-worth and how she lived each day. Back then, being childless wasn't just a painful, unfulfilled desire. It brought public shame, constant comparison, and a deep ache that went far beyond the walls of her home. Her struggles were on display, making the pressure to look okay even heavier. Every trip to worship required deep faith, but it was also an emotional battle. Imagine her walking through the crowds, hearing the laughter of happy families, while carrying a deep, unhealed wound. On the outside, she kept up the holy routines and religious expectations, but on the inside, she was fighting heavy sorrow, exhaustion, and unanswered questions. This is exactly where her story connects with your life today. When joy takes too long to return, you don't always fall apart loudly. Sometimes your soul just quietly shrinks inside. You still show up. You work. You smile. You keep praying. But deep down, a part of you is just too tired to keep holding on. That was Hannah's reality. She hadn't stopped believing, and she wasn't indifferent. She was carrying something much heavier, a weary faith, deeply wounded, yet still reaching out to God. Scripture doesn't paint her as cold or distant, but as someone who is broken. That detail is crucial because it corrects a misconception so many of us carry today. We think that real faith must always look neat, serene, and put together. But the Bible shows us that sometimes faith comes weeping. Sometimes it trembles, and sometimes it can only manage to stand before the Lord with whatever strength is left. That is exactly what happened at the temple. Hannah prayed from her brokenness. She didn't try to look strong or put on a performance. There was no religious show there. It was simply a heart poured out. And pouring out your soul means you stop trying to manage your pain and pretend you are fine. It means opening up your rawest wounds without any spiritual makeup, admitting that the burden has reached a point where you can no longer carry it gracefully. The Scripture truly comes alive right there. The core of this story isn't just what she asked for. It is how she approached God. She came completely vulnerable, tired, and undone. She came without a mask. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. It is a powerful image, a silent plea in the middle of a busy temple. She was whispering a prayer that no human could hear, but heaven was reading perfectly. Eli the priest did not understand her at first. He completely misjudged the situation and assumed the worst. This adds a deeply human layer to the story, showing something that still happens today. Not everyone knows how to distinguish between a surrendered heart and a messy, broken one. Sometimes when you have an honest moment with God, the people watching simply do not understand what you are going through. That hurts too. People looking from the outside might dismiss your genuine pain as an overreaction. Others might mistake your deep exhaustion for coldness, or confuse your quiet spirit with emotional distance. But this passage reminds us of a beautiful truth. Even if others misinterpret your struggle, God never misunderstands your pain. This changes everything. Her restoration didn't start when others finally understood her, nor did it begin the day her miracle became visible to the world. The true shift happened the moment she stopped holding back and poured out the exhaustion that was consuming her. Before her circumstances changed, how she carried them did. Before the answer arrived, there was a total surrender of her burdens. Before the breakthrough, she found something many people overlook: deep inner rest. That is the hidden treasure of this text. After praying and receiving a word, she went on her way. She ate. And Scripture says her face was no longer sad. Think about that. Samuel was not even born yet. Her external situation remained exactly the same. Nothing was solved yet, and the wait continued. Even so, her countenance was transformed. Something had finally let go deep inside, changing the relationship between her weary soul and her pain. God didn't start with a visible result. First, he touched the center of her anguish, and relief arrived before any physical evidence did. Think about what that means for your own journey. You know what it is like to keep up a strong front. But joy can return even before your external circumstances settle. God does not always restore the outside first. Often he works from the inside out, easing your hidden pressure, reordering your heart so you can finally breathe again. Visible signs will follow in his perfect timing, but this quiet work runs deep. At first, it might not feel like an explosion of joy, but rather a quiet, sober peace. Your heavy chest suddenly feels lighter. Praying becomes less of a battle. Despair loses its grip on your thoughts. A tiny thread of hope appears where you once felt completely numb. Do not brush that aside. It is the first proof that God is moving in those hidden spaces where you kept your silent grief. Hannah walked away from the altar completely changed, long before she actually held Samuel in her arms. That is what makes her story so powerful. A final miracle is beautiful on its own, but seeing the quiet and visible healing that happened first makes her feel like a close friend. To anyone who is waiting today, desperately needing to breathe again, you might think you can only feel real joy again when the answer finally arrives. You tie your peace to an open door, a restored relationship, or some breakthrough that still has not happened. But Hannah's journey reveals something much more delicate and profound for your soul. God can restore your soul before he restores what you lost. He can heal you inside while the storm still rages outside. He can spark fresh peace right in the middle of your unfinished story. That is why some people feel a shift inside long before anything changes outwardly. This is not about faking happiness or masking your pain anymore. What is happening is much deeper than that. The Lord is healing the root of your exhaustion, so that when the breakthrough finally comes, your heart can receive it from a healthy place. Then Samuel arrived. Yes, the visible answer appeared later. The promise became real. The impossible was suddenly standing right there. But the greatest sign of God's work was not the happy ending. It was when Hannah left the altar, no longer wearing that same weary, defeated look she had carried inside. And that truth matters for you, because God might already be working in your life. Even if it does not look like what you expected yet, heaven could be giving you back your joy and peace before the external situation even begins to resolve. Sometimes the first sign of returning joy is not a loud celebration, but a quiet, delicate shift in how your soul finds the strength to stand. It is a quiet grace that shows up before you even realize why you are no longer fighting the battle from that same exhausted place. This gentle sign becomes so clear when you suddenly realize that although you are in the same trial, you are no longer carrying the same heavy heart. I am reminded of Veronica Ramirez, a 42-year-old woman who, just like you, seemed to have everything completely under control to those around her, even though she spent months dragging a heavy, silent sadness. She still managed her home, did her work, and replied to everyone, smiling whenever she needed to. From the outside, nobody would have guessed she was completely running on empty. But when she closed her bedroom door at night, the quiet room forced her to face a truth she could no longer hide. She could not remember what joy felt like. Everything had piled up. First came a financial loss that shook her family's stability. Then a painful disappointment shattered something deep and fragile inside her heart. During that same time, her mother fell ill. Veronica went from barely holding herself up to trying to carry everyone else. No one saw the heavy toll of her strength. There were mornings when she just sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the light filtering through the curtains, holding her phone completely empty of any energy to start the day. It was not laziness, but a deep, overwhelming exhaustion, a deep dryness and fear that stole her will to keep going. The hardest part was not the tears. It was feeling like something inside her had quietly gone dark. She eventually admitted that she stopped praying for big things. She simply did not have the strength left for long, elaborate prayers. All she could say was, "Lord, do not let me go." She would whisper those words at night while washing dishes, when the kitchen was finally silent, and the running water was the only sound left in the house. At other times, she sat in her car before work, taking deep breaths and trying to gather enough strength to put on a brave face. But inside, everything felt so heavy. What makes her testimony so powerful is not that her circumstances suddenly got better. It is the way God began to rebuild her in secret, long before there was any outward proof that she was going to be okay. One Sunday night, while listening to a message very much like this one, something touched her deeply. It was not a dramatic emotional release. Nobody saw her fall to her knees. There was no scene, just a quiet, peaceful stillness, as if her soul finally stopped fighting for just a moment. She turned off her screen, sat on the bed, and wept in a completely different way. Those tears did not just come from pain. They brought relief, letting out months of heavy exhaustion. She felt a strange, beautiful sense that God was finally stepping into the exact place where she had felt so utterly alone. From that night on, her world did not change instantly. The bills were not paid the next morning. Her broken relationships did not suddenly fix themselves. Her mother still required constant daily care. Her schedule was still incredibly demanding. Yet she was no longer the same. Veronica began to notice little signs of hope. One morning you put on music while brewing coffee and catch yourself humming, forgetting for a moment the heavy mask you wear. Another day you open your window, let the fresh air in and feel that tight weight in your chest finally loosen up. In a simple conversation with your daughter, you laugh naturally again, suddenly realizing you haven't laughed like that in weeks. For a moment you stop just surviving and actually feel alive again. That is a quiet, beautiful miracle. Not because everything is fixed, but because God is restoring what the pressure of acting okay has slowly stolen from your soul. Over the weeks, your transformation becomes clearer, especially in how you pray. You no longer cry out to heaven only in desperation. You begin speaking from a place of deep trust. Your eyes are no longer fixed on your fears. The anxiety doesn't vanish overnight, but it stops ruling your mind. Sure, some nights are still heavy and long, but they don't end the same way. Where things felt tight and dark, a small space for peace begins to open. That matters. We often think God's power only shows up in massive, instant breakthroughs that everyone else can see. But true healing starts quietly, in your expressions, your deeper breathing, and when you finally stop trying to fake a smile. Your soul starts to heal long before your circumstances actually change. And when that happens, your heart realizes God wasn't absent. He was just working much deeper than you ever imagined. In time, things start falling into place for you. A better job opens up and your heavy financial burdens finally ease. Your family's health stabilizes and you find the strength to set boundaries where you once stayed quiet just to keep up appearances. But when you look back on this journey, you won't say the greatest miracle was just the open doors. You will know that the first thing God restored was your soul. And that is exactly what you need to hear today. Maybe you are waiting for a visible sign, desperately begging for a concrete answer to a situation that refuses to change. But do not underestimate what the Lord is already doing inside your heart. Sometimes His restoration begins in such a quiet, subtle way that you might miss it if you're only looking at the outside. A prayer that suddenly feels a little lighter, a sunrise that hurts a little less. A conversation where you don't feel shattered inside. A brief moment of peace in your daily routine. All of this can be the beginning of something much bigger. If this message is speaking directly to your heart, click that like button as a simple way of saying, "Lord, I believe you can restore my joy," and leave a comment saying, "God is restoring my soul." Declare it with faith. A simple step like that can spark hope not just for you, but for another weary soul who reads it and finds comfort in your silent testimony. This restoration isn't some emotional magic trick. It is the patient, loving work of God. It is a real healing that starts where nobody is looking, eventually breathing life back into the areas that felt completely dead. That is why this promise matters. It proves that the return of joy doesn't always show up like a loud, grand celebration. Sometimes it comes like a soft light in a dark room. First, it warms up one corner, then it slowly reaches another. Gradually, your entire inner world feels completely different. And here's the most beautiful part of it all. When this silent miracle begins, it changes how you walk, how you wait, and how you see God moving around you. You no longer fear God's silence or dread the waiting. You stop facing the day from that exhausted, broken place, and a deep, new wisdom starts to grow. It is a different way to live each day with hope, even when so much is still left unfinished. And this quiet strength doesn't just appear overnight. It builds slowly through tiny, simple shifts in your daily habits, giving God room to gently put your exhausted soul back together. When you have been running on empty for so long, you think you need a massive, earth-shattering breakthrough to find relief. But the Lord is always in the quiet whispers. Some healing begins with just taking one deep breath of faith. Other times it is a tiny, honest prayer, whispered when you are too exhausted to pretend anymore. On those days, heaven meets you in the quiet moments that slow your racing heart down. That is why when you are carrying so much, the most powerful thing you can offer is pure, raw honesty. No fancy words, no trying to sound strong or put together. Just real talk with God, telling Him exactly how tired you are, even when you can't sort out the mess of your emotions. Just opening up without trying to act tough. Sometimes all you can whisper from your soul is, "Lord, I can't do this alone today." Other times it's just, "Here I am," and that is more than enough. God doesn't need you to put on a perfect show. He just wants you to stop hiding behind the mask. There is incredible strength in quiet moments. We are constantly flooded with noise screens, tasks, notifications, endlessly trying to keep up appearances. Your thoughts are constantly racing, and your soul gets completely lost in the blur. That is why unplugging for just a few minutes, no phone, no distractions. This quiet can be a sacred space, not to empty yourself, but to let down the mask and make room for God. Some silences do not demand anything, they just embrace you. Moments when your weary heart finally stops performing. Right then, you realize the Lord is still there, breathing close, quietly, holding you up when you cannot pretend anymore. A slow breath can be your way back to His peace. It sounds so simple, but when you are exhausted from pretending, your body stiffens and your chest tightens. Your mind races and your hidden emotions tangle up. In that heavy state, a slow, mindful breath combined with a quiet word of faith helps more than you can imagine. Just breathe in slowly, whispering, "God is here." Exhale gently and tell your weary soul, "I am not alone." This does not replace your healing, it walks with you. It reminds your tired body that you are safe, and it tells your soul that you can actually rest for a second without falling completely apart. Another powerful tool is writing. When you keep your struggles bottled up inside to look strong, those thoughts grow, twist, and become incredibly heavy. But when you write them out before God, the chaos starts to clear. You do not need pretty words. Just write down the pain, the exhaustion, the worries, and everything you cannot understand. Later, looking at those pages, you might realize how much of your burden is just fear, how much is old grief, and what actually belongs to today. That simple act brings a clarity that your noisy mind was blocking. Worship also plays a beautiful role and healing a heart that has been pretending for too long. Not because it hides your pain, but because it shifts your entire atmosphere. Playing a gentle song in your kitchen or in your car as the sun sets can help you feel God close, even when you feel completely empty inside. Some lyrics hold you when you have no more words. Gentle melodies can release all that built-up tension from trying to look okay. Sometimes worship is not singing loudly. It is just sitting there, letting God's truth wrap around you while you finally catch your breath. But we also need something else. We have to unplug from the noise that drains us. Not everything you look at feeds your peace, and not every conversation leaves you better off. Not every habit helps you heal. Some days, stepping away from the rush, the comparisons, and the endless notifications is essential, and releasing the heavy pressure to reply to everyone is an act of pure obedience. Guarding your soul is not selfish. It is recognizing that your weary heart needs less clutter and more of God. The beautiful thing about these habits is that none of them require you to be perfect. They do not demand that you be strong or that you have it all figured out. They are simple paths where the Lord quietly steps back into your daily routine. Through them, your inner world becomes lighter, your mind slows down, and the crushing pressure eases. You begin to understand something beautiful. True joy does not always rush back all at once. It often returns slowly, as God gently teaches your soul a brand new way to live. And when that happens, it shifts how you navigate your daily work, your relationships, and all the heavy demands this life keeps throwing at you. That is when your faith stops being just a bandage for your wounds and becomes real wisdom for your daily walk. It is one thing to feel God in a quiet prayer room, but it is a completely different thing to walk with Him when the alarm blares and traffic is backed up, when your job demands more than you have to give, or when someone treats you with cold indifference, and your phone fills up with pictures, reminding you of what you do not have yet. Right there in the messy, ordinary moments, with no background music, is where your peace is decided. That is where spiritual wisdom really shows. It is not usually some massive, dramatic revelation. Sometimes it is just small, silent choices. Choosing not to lash out from your pain. Staying quiet instead of arguing. Breathing deeply before assuming the worst. Refusing to compare your hidden struggle with someone else's highlight reel. Pausing to pray before committing to something that looks great on the outside, but drains your soul. That is real faith. It isn't flashy, but it guards you from deep burnout. Let's look at an example. Imagine dragging yourself to work after a completely sleepless night. You barely slept, your mind racing until dawn. Your eyes open, your body feels like lead, and you head out on autopilot into the noisy, exhausting world. Sitting in traffic, you scroll through your phone, seeing bad news, urgent texts, and endless things to compare yourself to. Before your workday even begins, your heart is already heavy. Then a coworker snaps at you, an urgent task drops, and that tight, exhausting pressure builds up inside you all over again. In that moment, living with wisdom doesn't mean pretending you are okay. It is not about forcing a fake smile over deep fatigue. True faith simply acknowledges the struggle, recognizes the trap, and stops a hurt emotion from taking over your entire day. It might not change your demanding circumstances, but it completely shifts how you face them. Instead of reacting in anger, you lean into quietness. Instead of feeding the dark thoughts that hurt the most, you lay them before God. Where you used to rush into a panic, you choose to wait. That is real, practical faith in action. It happens in our relationships too. Sometimes the unspoken tensions drain us far more than actual arguments. A cold, unexplained distance hurts deeply. A silent, icy shoulder often feels much heavier than a loud fight. At home with friends or with a partner, we can easily fill the silence with painful assumptions. When you are exhausted from pretending to be fine, reckless assumptions only worsen your hidden pain. That is why God's wisdom is so essential. It teaches you not to view everything through your wounds, not to take silence as rejection, or let a tense moment define your worth when you are already struggling to hold it together. This does not make you naive. It keeps your inner life clean. Once you walk this way, you stop letting other people's behavior dictate your peace of mind. You stop reacting to everyone else's mood swings and begin to discern better. Yes, some hard conversations must happen. Boundaries must be set, and relationships require honest truth. Yet even then, your weary heart can speak with quiet strength, instead of reacting from the emotional chaos of the moment. That makes a huge difference. Social media is another trap. Nothing drains a soul trying to keep up appearances like staring at everyone else's highlight reels. While you are barely surviving a heavy day behind your forced smile screens show you vacations, perfect smiles, rapid success, and flawless lives. If your soul was already tired of pretending, this only drags you deeper into comparison. Your joy fades not because God has left you, but because your mind is crowded with noise. You do not have to carry everything. Not everything deserves space in your heart. What you see should not dictate your value. Daily wisdom means protecting your mind, especially when you are already exhausted from holding it all together. Sometimes closing an app is the only way to guard your peace. In other seasons, putting your phone down for a few minutes gives your tired mind space to breathe. It seems like a small step, but it is huge. What you focus on shapes your soul. Then come those hard decisions that do not arrive with a clear, dramatic sign from above, but arrive during deep fatigue, pressure, and doubt. Deciding on a job, holding on to a relationship, speaking up, or staying still. We often rush because we cannot stand the discomfort of pretending we are fine. But a quick exit is not always God's way. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is pause, rest, and wait for clarity. True peace guides you, not as a cheap emotion, but as a steady light helping you discern between frantic anxiety and genuine divine direction. Eventually, your heart learns the difference. You realize not everything urgent is important, and not every open door is meant for you. You see that some paths look amazing at first, but leave your soul deeply unsettled later. And when God begins to train your heart in this sensitivity, you stop reacting to life and start walking through it with deep discernment. This shifts everything. Your daily work stops being a source of endless pressure and becomes a space where you practice peace. Relationships stop being minefields of hurt and become places of honest growth. Making decisions no longer feels like a constant threat, but rather an invitation to listen closely to God's quiet voice. None of this happens overnight, though. Wisdom does not fall from heaven as an instant fix. It is shaped slowly through ordinary mornings, difficult conversations, deep exhaustion, and tiny, unnoticed choices. But when this new way of living takes root, something beautiful happens. Your soul stops just enduring and begins to mature. Right when you stop chasing quick relief and start seeking real depth, one of the hardest questions of your journey emerges. What do you do when God is near but silent? It is a delicate question. What do you do when God is right there but does not answer as fast as your weary heart desires? Because trusting is easy when life moves forward. But holding on while wearing a fake smile through heaven's silence is agonizing. That is where true faith is tested. The fleeting high of a good day is not enough to sustain you. Your faith must dig deeper than your temporary feelings. God's silence hurts deeply, not because his love has faded, but because your exhausted soul craves signs, understanding, and the clear open door to ease the waiting. Yet nothing moves at the pace you want. Your prayers ascend, the slow days crawl by, and everything remains painfully unresolved. You are left with that heavy feeling of speaking to heaven, only to hear absolute stillness in return. Few admit it, but this quiet waiting is exhausting. You find yourself overthinking the same problems again and again behind closed doors. It hits you at night, when the room goes dark, and the doubts you forced yourself to ignore all day come rushing back. It is there in the morning making coffee when you realize the heavy burden did not vanish overnight, and relief feels miles away. It slips into your quiet prayers, whispering to God, "Lord, I am still holding on, but I desperately need to know if you are still moving." That honest prayer does not anger him. He cares for your raw, genuine needs. But trouble starts when we interpret his silence solely through our pain. When exhaustion dictates your perspective, a delay looks like rejection, and waiting feels like being forgotten. You mistake the quiet for his absence, and slowly, your tired heart starts believing a lie. You think because you see no signs, God has stopped working. But his silence is never abandonment. Sometimes it cultivates depth, prepares your heart, or becomes God's way of protecting what is to come. Maybe you aren't ready to carry this peace yet. The hard part is, you never realize that while trying to hold it all together. Think of a tiny seed buried deep in the dirt. From the outside, absolutely nothing seems to be moving. No green stem, no fruit, no instant breakthrough to celebrate. Anyone watching you from the outside would think nothing is happening at all. But deep down, a quiet, delicate, life-altering process is unfolding. That seed has to break to let new life grow. The unseen isn't empty, it is working. That is how God operates. Even when you look completely still to everyone else, you might feel like absolutely nothing is changing. But that doesn't mean heaven has gone silent on you. Some breakthroughs begin in total silence. God is shaping answers right now, completely out of your line of sight. Real change starts deep inside, where nobody can measure it. That's why God's silence is never a sign of rejection. Often it is just a sacred space where he is doing a work too deep for quick explanations. Scripture shows this time and again. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 30, verse 15, there is a powerful truth for what you are carrying today. In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength. Let that sink in. It doesn't say strength comes from constant, exhausting hustle. True spiritual progress isn't measured by how fast your prayers get answered. Sometimes your deepest strength is forged in the quiet. Sometimes saving your soul starts when you finally stop running. God's most powerful work happens in absolute silence. That kind of faith hurts, but it grows you. I don't mean giving up in sadness. I mean a trust that refuses to quit. A weary heart that keeps seeking God even without a map to guide you. A hope resting entirely on the Lord's character, not on instant signs. That is the very thing that transforms you while heaven is silent. In that silence, hidden things start surfacing. You finally see how much anxiety you were masking behind your forced smiles. It exposes how desperately you wanted to stay in control, and reveals your deep, aching need for real comfort. In this quiet space, God isn't just fixing your problems. He is working on you, refining, healing, and building you up. He corrects your perspective and expands your capacity. None of this is comfortable. Some days the weight of keeping up appearances is so heavy, you just want one clear word from him. Just a simple yes, a no, a date, a visible shift, anything to end the exhausting suspense. Yet God, who sees the whole picture, gently sits with you in silence, while arranging pieces you cannot even see yet. His slow way of working tests your patience, but it protects your future. If you are feeling this exhaustion today, leave a comment. Write, even if I don't understand. The silence, I still trust God. Say it slowly. Let it be a real spiritual decision. A confession like that doesn't come from a fleeting emotion. It comes from deep maturity, and that is why it is so precious. The unseen realm is moving, even if you can't measure it. Maybe the answer isn't showing up the way you expected. Perhaps the wait has dragged on far too long. Maybe your tired heart is learning patience in a way you never wanted to. Even so, God has not dropped your story. Sometimes He stays silent to work at a level where human noise cannot interfere. Some doors cannot be rushed. Some processes are ruined when you force them. Certain joys would not be healthy if they returned too soon. So don't call this season empty just because God is working in secret. Eventually, you will see that this heavy, quiet season had a profound purpose. The day is coming when you will realize His delay was not abandonment. You will see that while you felt only empty absence, heaven was arranging every single detail with perfect precision. And right there in that very place where your soul learns not to shatter, while waiting a new strength is born. A quiet maturity that only grows when joy is delayed, but God keeps holding you together from the inside. This strength isn't born on easy days. It forms during the hard, exhausting wait, not some romanticized version, but the kind that drains you, tests you, and forces you to keep going, even when you are exhausted inside. That is where your soul matures. It reveals which part of your faith was just hype, and which part has actually started growing deep, unbreakable roots. This painful step is not useless. It has a hidden purpose. Waiting transforms you, even though at first we all just want the quick fix. We want God to move fast, relieve the pain, and fix what keeps us awake. But when the days drag on, your heart enters a different school. You start seeing who you really are. Noticing your hidden fears and impatience, you realize how much control you are desperately trying to maintain. But if you stay close to God, you will grow so much stronger inside. This quiet maturity doesn't need to show off. You become someone who still hurts, but no longer panics in the dark. You don't shatter as easily anymore. Your tired heart still has deep questions, but you no longer view His delays as rejection. This deep work never happens overnight. For example, imagine a woman who has spent months praying for a new job opportunity. Every morning she checks her inbox before heading out, staring at her phone as her coffee slowly grows cold on the kitchen table. You've sent resumes, waited for calls, rewritten your CV, and begged God for direction. Some doors seem closed, but they fell through. Others gave you hope, only to fade. Now it is not just bills weighing you down, but the exhaustion of pretending everything is fine while stuck. It feels like everyone else is moving forward, while you are left behind, smiling through it. That kind of waiting tears you up inside. First comes frustration, then total exhaustion. If you do not guard your heart behind that polite smile, a bitter voice whispers that nothing will ever change. But when God holds you close through this silent trial, something deep begins to mature. You might not have the final answer, but you stop checking your inbox with desperate panic. You still need that door to open. You keep praying and knocking, but deep inside your posture has slowly started to change. You find more patience, less panic, and sharper wisdom. You even start saying no to things you once accepted out of pure fear. That is real growth. Your waiting stops being just a delay and becomes a sacred season of preparation. What felt like empty space starts revealing purpose. God is not just preparing the answer, He is also working on the soul who will receive it. That changes how you survive this season. Because if you receive a blessing while still faking strength, you might mismanage it. A door opened too early will end up weighing more than it helps. A soul exhausted from maintaining a perfect image cannot truly rest, even when what you prayed for finally arrives. That is why God is quietly expanding your capacity to receive. In this waiting, you are learning to separate true need from desperate rushing. Your faith becomes less impulsive. Your soul learns to tolerate not knowing everything. Peace no longer depends on keeping up appearances or pleasing others. Slowly, you realize you are not forgotten in this silent process. This matters so much for you today, because the joy that is returning will not look like the fragile joy you had before. It is deeply refined, purer, and far more resilient. It will not just depend on good circumstances, but on a new depth forged in this season. What God is restoring in you will not be fragile, precisely because it survived the slow, painful fire of waiting, while you had to look strong. Some things only become real when tested by time, silence, and absolute dependence on God. Patience, for instance, is no longer just a concept. Trust stops being a lovely idea. Surrender stops sounding like just a spiritual word and becomes a raw necessity. All of this happens while your answer is still on the way. Do not despise this quiet season. It might not be the chapter you would have written, but it can become the most transformative one of your life. Sometimes you only see that later. You look back and realize you do not react the same way anymore. You notice your thoughts have finally stopped racing so hard. You recall the panic from months ago and realize that something deep inside was getting stronger, quietly, without making a sound. You realize God did not leave you stranded. He was shaping you. This does not erase the strain of pretending to be okay. It would be dishonest to say so. Some days are still incredibly hard. Some mornings you have to fight to find hope again. Many big questions remain unanswered on the table. Yet even now, your heart finds a different way to stand. You are no longer driven by the panic of pretending you have it all together. There is a quiet, steady strength in you now, and it matters because it prepares your soul. When joy returns to a heart matured by your painful waiting, it brings lasting stability, not just temporary relief. It enters a soul expanded by God, rather than a life exhausted by pretending to be fine. That difference changes how you receive, protect, and stand firm. So even if the delay still hurts, do not waste it. Some days you feel so close. Other times, everything feels miles away. You might not even know where you are in this long process. But if God is building this quiet strength inside you, then your waiting is not in vain. It is leading you to a restoration that is not just beautiful, but deeply sustainable. Right there, as your soul gathers silent strength, another deep need often rises to the surface: the healing of old hidden wounds that still carry deep pain. Right there in that quiet place, where waiting has matured your soul, an uncomfortable truth begins to show itself. There are still wounds whispering from deep within you. Some are very old, while others are painfully fresh. Some scars came from sudden goodbyes. Others remain active from a betrayal you never saw coming, a broken promise, emotional abandonment, or a season where you had to be strong for everyone else, when you desperately needed someone to carry you. Over time, your heart learns to keep going. Yes, but it does not always heal at the same speed as your busy daily routine, and it shows. It shows in how you guard yourself even when no one is attacking. It shows in how hard it is to fully trust. It hits when a tiny thing triggers an old memory, and suddenly, without knowing why, your soul aches again, as if that painful scene never truly ended. Suddenly, a simple word, a tone of voice, a delay or a cold absence, a silent phone or a cold text, hurts far more than it should. It is not about the action itself, but what it triggers inside you. That is where real emotional healing must begin, not as a lovely concept, nor as a phrase you repeat just to feel better. We are talking about God working deep inside those places where pain has lived too long. Because an unhealed wound will slowly change the way you see everything. What others do with ease, you approach on high alert. Simple moments that should bring peace get filtered through your fear and constant exhaustion. When that quiet strain builds up, sadness stops being a passing phase. It turns into a heavy fog you carry inside every day. You know exactly what I mean. It hits you at night when you finally drop the act, The noise fades and the room goes completely quiet. Your head hits the pillow, utterly exhausted. A sliver of hallway light slips under the door. Your body lies down, but your chest still feels tight. Uninvited memories creep back in. Old words echo with painful clarity. On days like this, the heaviest burden isn't even what you're dealing with right now, but the damage from what broke you long ago. You need gentle grace, not judgment. God doesn't look at your hidden wounds with impatience. He doesn't force you to heal on a schedule, nor shame you for hurting over things you thought you'd beaten. He knows how hard you fought to survive. He sees the private parts of your story that still ache whenever anything touches those raw places where you felt completely abandoned, let down, or exhausted. And because he understands, his healing hand is never harsh. He brings truth, but he handles your fragile heart with ultimate gentleness. True emotional healing rarely happens in one sudden, perfect moment. It feels more like a warm embrace wrapping around your tightest anxieties. Slowly, you finally feel safe enough to let your guard down. The knot in your chest begins to loosen. Heavy memories lose their grip, and one day you realize you aren't constantly reacting from a place of pain anymore. That shift is beautiful. Not because your painful past is erased, but because it no longer controls your life today. The memory remains, but it loses its authority. The hurt that used to dictate your choices fades away. Your scars stay, yes, but they tell a brand new story. They don't just show where you got hurt. They show what God restored. Let's look closer at this. When you are tired of pretending, you might think healing means feeling absolutely nothing at all. But God's touch doesn't turn you to stone. It sets you free. It purifies your sensitive heart rather than numbing it, so you don't have to stay hardened. He strengthens you, so life can't easily break you anymore. That changes everything. When you are worn out from guarding yourself, you constantly wait for the next blow. But as God rebuilds you from the inside out, you learn to protect your peace without letting fear run your life. Step by step, you love with genuine freedom. This doesn't mean life gets easy overnight. You will still have tender days. Some wounds are still a work in progress. Old, heavy emotions will occasionally try to pull you back down. But under God's care, your heart is no longer defenseless. You begin to stand strong on your own. You breathe easier, think differently, and finally feel free from your old battles. Think about giving your all only to be betrayed. For years, even the smallest, most harmless detail triggers your defenses and forces you to play safe. A delayed reply, a promise that sounds too familiar, or someone getting too close. Everything triggers an alarm. It's not just about what others do. Your old pain is desperately trying to shield you, but maintaining that wall is exhausting you. When God steps in, He doesn't just tell you to snap out of it. He goes deeper, healing your fear and showing you that you can rest while remaining wise. He teaches you boundaries without making you cold. He softens your heart again without leaving you vulnerable to chaos. That in itself is a miracle. The same goes for deep exhaustion. Some fatigue doesn't come from a busy schedule, but from years of carrying grief you never allowed yourself to feel. Your body moves, your calendar stays full, but inside you need something far deeper than just a weekend getaway or a temporary distraction. Your soul needs rest. You need to hear with gentle authority that you don't have to keep surviving on survival mode like this, and that is exactly what God whispers to you. He doesn't say it with judgment, harshness, or from a safe distance. He speaks as a father who knows the heavy burdens you kept secret, and how long you stayed silent just to protect those around you. How many times you smiled while begging inside for relief. There is something incredibly healing about being seen so deeply by your Creator, because true emotional healing begins when your heart no longer feels isolated in its struggle. Maybe that's why these words aren't here to demand more strength, but to wrap you in spiritual shelter. The Lord doesn't want you to just survive. He wants to heal your weary soul. He wants to touch that built-up sadness, the mental fatigue, the marks of rejection, and the lingering echo of past betrayal. The fear of hoping again, the habit of putting up walls. His patient restoration is gently reaching every single one of those places. As this healing settles and your spirit recovers what you thought was lost forever, your ability to stand strong without having to fake it, it's no longer just about getting through the day. It's about moving forward with a lighter heart and breathing freely again, with a deep peace that takes root. This gentle work is often quiet, but it prepares you for something vital. After healing your wounds, God teaches your heart to speak from a place of victory again, even while some things are still being resolved. As you heal, the way you talk to yourself in God's presence changes. So far, you and I have walked through the pain, the waiting, the silence, and the exhausting scars that remained. But now it is time to step onto new ground, not because every single problem is solved overnight, but because you've reached the point where your weary heart can no longer spend all its energy repeating the stories of what broke you. You also need to speak raw truth, to hear an inner voice aligned with what God is actually doing. It's time to rise, even slowly, and realize this silent grief doesn't have the right to rule you forever. That is part of your healing. Loud, forced declarations of strength are just ego. They make noise but quickly fade. True peace comes from quiet, honest faith. It isn't a fake performance, and it doesn't deny how much you hurt. It comes from a deeply humble, weary place of someone who has wept, waited, and yet somehow feels God's steady hand still holding their fragile story. From that honest place, your tired heart can finally speak differently. You no longer have to rush or pretend. You don't need forced self-sufficiency or fake optimism. True victory is quiet. You used to whisper behind your polite smile, "I won't survive this." But now, with God gently healing your hidden exhaustion, something new is growing. You can honestly say, "I don't know how this ends, but I am no longer alone in it." That doesn't sound spectacular, but it's incredibly powerful when you're tired of faking strength. It's born of real comfort in God's presence. It's the same with genuine hope. Once, you looked ahead and saw only endless pretending and exhaustion. Today, without having all the answers, your weary soul can finally say, "My story didn't end where I broke." That is a true victory. Not because your quiet struggle has fully ended, but because you stopped letting the exhausting pain write your final chapter. That is where gentle, honest strength begins. You no longer need to put on a brave face or perform. No more hollow affirmations. Knowing God is working is enough. You survived days when you had to fake happiness through total exhaustion. Now real joy is returning, deeper, quieter, and far more secure. As that truth settles in, the heavy mask slips away. Your chest loosens, and you can finally breathe freely. Your mind stops battling to keep up appearances. Even in the middle of your daily, exhausting routine, this quiet healing is very real. You're in the kitchen, preparing dinner, actually relaxed for once, realizing your chest doesn't feel nearly as heavy as before. You step outside, watch the busy world go by, and realize you aren't just acting. The exhausting weight of pretending is finally lifted. A sudden text or an old memory hits you. Things that used to drain your last drop of energy, but you don't break. Not because you've built a cold, hard wall, but because God is healing your core. That is real victory. It doesn't look like the loud success the world praises. No applause for keeping it together, just quiet, deep restoration. It shows up privately when you stop feeling like a failure for being tired and still in process. When you finally realize that, moving forward without a forced, exhausting smile is proof that heaven is stepping in. When your weary heart can say with quiet peace that this season of pretending won't forever rob you of trust breathing and genuine joy. Right here, on this path. You must let these gentle truths slip inside your worn-out soul. This heavy exhaustion does not define who you are. Your secret pain doesn't have the last word, and hiding it didn't lessen your worth. God has never lost hold of you. The true joy returning to you won't be fragile because you survived a long, dark season of pretending. It will be deeper. You aren't being rebuilt just to go back to pretending you're okay. God is creating a genuine, deep inner stability inside of you, one you have never known before. That's why your faith is so honest now, and why everyday storms no longer shatter you. Even with endless questions, you feel a quiet strength. This is what victory looks like when you stop hiding your unfinished battles and no longer drown in them. You're still waiting, but without a shattered spirit. Your heart is still crossing the dark night, but now you know a genuine dawn is coming. That is finally enough to give real thanks. Because spiritual growth isn't about looking perfect to others. Real progress is the quiet peace you feel facing the same old stress and the gentle, honest way you speak to yourself, and your actual ability to drop the control and rest in God's hands. And when that quiet victory settles in you, stop straining to keep up appearances. Your soul finally prepares for what you forgot how to do, letting go of control and resting. When you stop forcing yourself to be strong, you remember what your soul forgot during all those years of weariness. You were created to rest. I don't just mean physical sleep, though your body desperately needs that too. I mean that moment you realize you can't keep carrying everything pretending the outcome of this story is entirely up to you. For too long you've tried to micromanage your hidden fears, your hope, and the heavy emotions you mask daily, trying to prevent every potential hurt, keeping yourself from falling apart publicly, desperately trying to fix what isn't yours to resolve. That pressure to look perfect has completely drained you. Just surviving until today says so much about your silent strength. You smiled through dark days, worked through your questions, and kept everything moving when you were entirely empty inside. But you can't win this by holding your fake strength tighter. This heavy burden only lightens when you drop the mask and lay it in God's hands. And letting go of that control is incredibly hard. Letting go does not always feel natural. It feels scary and risky when you have been holding it together so long. It leaves you feeling vulnerable, like your heart is totally defenseless. But that is exactly where a different kind of peace begins. Resting in God does not mean ignoring life, nor is it about putting on a brave face and just accepting the pain. True rest, in its deepest sense, means you stop pretending everything depends on your own emotional strength. It is admitting there is a limit to what you can carry alone. It is letting God into your prayers and into those hidden places where you still try to control everything just to avoid hurting again. That shift changes everything. Your breathing finally slows down. The racing thoughts in your mind finally stop screaming so loudly. Anxiety loses its tight grip. Your body finally realizes that you do not have to live in survival mode anymore. Picture a quiet evening. The house is finally still. The lights are dimmed, and you set your phone down for just a few minutes. Outside, you might hear a car passing by, a distant door closing, or a dog barking far away. But inside, you have a fresh opportunity, not to fix everything before you sleep, but to honestly tell God, "Lord, I cannot keep fighting this alone tonight." That prayer might seem small, but it is not. Sometimes, a weary soul finally stops demanding another round of fighting, drops the perfect front, and simply lets heaven cover them. Not because you have all the answers, or because your wounds are healed. It is for a different reason entirely. You finally realize that running yourself ragged will not save you. Trust will. Some people only know how to push, strive, and carry it all. You have done it so long that you stay tense even before God, feeling guilty for just sitting still. It is hard to drop a worry without grabbing it right back, or to rest without feeling like you are failing. Yet God gently invites you to a different place, where faith does not just fight, it rests. That is where real joy finally finds fertile ground to grow. Because when you are constantly pretending to be strong, you cannot truly receive. Living in a constant state of alert makes it hard to notice God's gentle work. You need inner space and quiet. You need the kind of surrender that does not feel like defeat, but like pure relief. Maybe tonight or whenever you are listening to this, you do not need more explanations. Maybe what your soul really needs is permission to lay down the heavy mask. Stop pretending to be strong and just sit in God's presence for a few minutes without trying to fix everything or worrying about tomorrow. Just breathing, surrendering, and resting. When you finally let your heart rest, even for a moment, something changes inside. The prayers you whisper next will no longer feel forced. They will flow from a deeper place. They will not come from a place of panic, but from quiet trust. Because after all the waiting, the keeping up appearances, and the silent battles, you are finally ready to do the most beautiful thing. Just sit before God and let Him hold you. Dear Father, I come to you right now with an open heart and a tired soul, bringing all the pain, everything I still do not understand, and that tiny spark of hope that is somehow still alive through these hard days, because you held it. I am here in your presence, without the mask, needing no fake strength. I am not hiding the heavy sadness that has left me breathless. Lord, you know everyone listening to this. You see what they hide behind their smiles. You know the story behind the stable image they show the world. Look at those who are exhausted tonight, whose minds will not stop racing. Memories that crash in uninvited questions, spinning through sleepless nights, and heavy worries that have settled deep down inside their chests. Pour your peace over this exhausted soul. Where there is confusion, bring clarity. Where fear has taken root, breathe rest. If their heart feels trapped, open a window of relief. If anxiety has tried to rule their day, lay your hand on that inner storm and teach their soul to breathe again under your gentle care. I also bring their families before you now. You know where there is distant silence or an old wound that still hurts. You know where tenderness is gone and where they need healing. Bring patience and wisdom, Lord. Walk through the quiet hallways of their homes where tension has built up. If there are tables where peace is missing, or bedrooms where tears have been shed in secret behind closed doors, and if there are people sharing a roof who feel miles apart, please visit them. Bring calm to their relationships, gentleness to their words, and light to everything that has become too heavy to carry. Tonight I also bring the wounds that are still tender. Not just the big ones everyone can see, but the private aches that flare up when something touches them without warning. You know where they felt abandoned or betrayed. You saw the exact day they broke inside, even while they kept working and smiling for everyone else. Touch those places with your tenderness. Do not let their past rule their present. Untie the tight knots that have bound their heart for so long. Bring safety where fear took over, and heal the burning memories. For the one whose joy has slowly faded behind that brave face, I lift them up. I am not asking for a fake smile. I ask for that deep joy that only comes from you, which truly sustains. The joy that strengthens, restores the will to live, makes each day feel breathable, and brightens up their heavy eyes. I pray that your peace returns, clean, steady, and real, even while you are still in this heavy process. Let it show when you wake up in your thoughts, in the tone of your prayers, in the peace you face daily life with. I know you have been waiting so long, putting on a brave face. You might not even remember how long you have been praying for this. You still smile, keeping it together, while inside you are at your limit. You still believe, but your faith is just so tired. May God hold you close today. Let His presence remind you that His silence is not absence, and delay does not mean you are forgotten. Not a single tear behind your smile has escaped His sight. May He strengthen you without hardening your heart. May He expand your soul to receive what is coming next with wisdom, quiet peace, and deep gratitude. I pray for your body, which has carried so much weight. God knows when your exhaustion is no longer just physical. He knows when your soul has carried more than seemed possible while you kept responding to everyone. May He give you rest and ease your tight chest. Quiet your mind that has been racing to keep up appearances. Let deep, gentle sleep finally return to your weary soul. Release the constant need to stay on high alert. Let your heart stop pretending, surrender control, and rest under His protection. Where you feel guilt, receive forgiveness. Where you feel shame, find dignity. In your dryness, find comfort. In your hidden sadness, let hope bloom. Never believe the lie that you are fighting this battle all alone, even when you feel completely isolated. Remember that God is still right here. Feel His hand on the most ordinary days while you work, walk, or cook meals, while you stare out the window or lie awake in the quiet before sleep. His hand is close. May you notice His gentle whispers and recognize His daily acts of love. Learn to feel His peace even while you wait for things to unfold. I lay your entire future before Him today. May He open the right doors and mercifully close the ones that do not fit. May He bring order to the chaos. Let Him touch your job, your choices, your finances, your relationships, your health, and everything stealing your peace. Let His wisdom and favor rule over every single area. What has been delayed, trust it fully to His perfect timing. May He redeem your pain and rekindle the spark that went out under the pressure. Thank Him for never walking away when your soul is shaking. Thank Him for holding you up when you do not even have the words to pray. Your deep sadness will not have the final say. Your joy is returning. Even after your longest nights, He is already preparing a new morning. Open your heart to receive His peace and warm embrace today. Receive His deep healing. May He protect you, guard your home, bless your rest, strengthen your weary faith, and lift your heavy spirits right now. Know with a gentle, profound certainty that beautiful moments are still coming. God is definitely not finished writing your story yet. In Jesus' name, amen. Before you go, type amen below. If this prayer comforted you, please share it with someone who needs it today. Subscribe and come back tomorrow. We want this channel to remain a peaceful space where God comforts, lifts you up, and speaks directly to your heart. May the Lord hold you close, strengthen you, and bless you abundantly.